what can we do in the early years to start to practice this or to start to turn around a train that maybe, maybe we're currently patterned after the way our parents parented us because we don't know what else to do. What are some of the first steps to start to turn that train of disconnection
Mhm.
around?
I think if there was a magical formula, which there isn't, but if there is, um, that it would be that we have to understand a few key things about ourselves as individuals while we come into the world of parenting. We have to understand a few key things about child development, and then from there, figure out how to step in. So, in terms of understanding ourselves, one of the biggest things that I think I had to come to terms with, and I offer it forward to the clients that I work with now, is that my child cannot make me feel anything. So
Hmm.
when I'm in the midst of some kind of a trigger or some kind of a reactiveness, it's not because of my child. My child did not make me feel that. Because five other parents could be lined up behind me, having their children acting the same way and responding quite differently. One of them might be amused by it, another might be confused by it, another might become curious because of it, and I might become reactive because of it. So it's something in me that makes me feel the way that I do.
Mhm.
Now I've got to sort out, what is that? That's the programming. Or as Don Miguel Ruiz refers to it, the domestication,
The
right?
domestication?
The way that
Ooh,
we're domesticated.
I love that.
Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and
Yeah.
response, there is a space. And that space is what it is to be a parent. It's figuring out that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is your power to choose, your power to change the course, your power to get curious rather than reactive, your power to know that you have to crack yourself open and really hold yourself accountable to the idea that your child did not make you feel this way. You made you feel this way. And the good
Mm.
news in that is you then hold all of the power for um, transforming that feeling into something that works for you and for your child rather than against. So
And
that's
what you're describing mindfulness, right? Like that's how we
absolutely,
grow
yeah.
that muscle, that ability to rest in that space, to
Mhm.
make those choices, to be able to pause that reactivity train or slow it down. But I love this idea that, that this sort of radical responsibility and keep going. I wanted to see where you're going with
Mhm.
this, like this idea that we, if we're in a situation, our child can't make us feel things. Yeah, at the same time, like there are behaviors that we can that are do not meet our needs, right? That aren't acceptable as far as meeting our needs. Like, I don't want you to smash glasses all over the floor, right? Like
Mhm.
if we want to go to extreme there. So talk to me a little bit more about this idea.
Yeah. And so when we can be the observer of our own mind and we
Mm.
can begin to have that radical accountability for our own patterns of thinking, then we can come to a situation like what you've just described, or any other of the, multitude of challenging situations that present on a daily basis when you are raising up a human being. We can come to that with a perception that will allow us to see our children from the inside out. So rather than coming into that situation and think, I gave you life and this is how you're going to behave, where we have this idea that they're out to get us or they're manipulating us, and so they then need to be manipulated in turn in order to have their behavior controlled or whatever it is. You can imagine when you come in sort of front loaded with that kind of perception, that kind of thinking, well, you don't have a fighting chance in terms of being able to enter that situation and respond rather than react in a way that allows for your child to feel emotionally safe
Yeah,
with
yeah,
what's
because you're
happening.
coming into it as a fighter, right? You're
That's
coming into it as a boxer. You got the gloves up, you're ready to go, you're angry, and there's zero curiosity about like, well, maybe there's some, but like, why did you do this? What needs are you trying to meet? What's going on? What is the root of this behavior? So then I can understand and then like kind of coach you to maybe a more positive
yeah.
outcome or whatever, right? You're if you're part of the equation of the two people creating the fight at this
That's
moment.
right. That's right. And we've already in that way entered into the situation with some pretty negative assumptions about who our children are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's why it's so important to do that inner work as the parent, because you have to actually shift it within your being. The doing flows from the being. So if you want to show up differently and do differently, everybody always says, Dr. Vanessa, what do I do when? If you want to show up and do differently, you must first shift the being. The doing flows from the being. That's why the mantra in Discipline Without Damage is you see it, you see what's going on, you feel it for your child from the inside, and you also feel it for yourself from the inside. And then you be. You allow the being to just sort of open up, and the doing flows from the being. And then we go to sort of the second step of the equation, right? So we've addressed the idea that we must transform ourselves along this journey. And then we have to understand who our child is. And that's a little bit about understanding some of the very sort of basic principles of child development. Things like kids need connection more than they need anything else. Things like we have to have reasonable expectations of our children. 4-year-olds don't share. They just don't. I mean, sometimes because it's all going really smoothly, you'll see that they're happy to give another child their toy, but it's not because they know how to share. They don't have that part of their frontal lobe developed just yet. That'll come online in the next year to 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't mean you're raising a sociopath when your 4-year-old does not share.
No, but if I had $1 for every time a parent says to me, I think I'm raising a sociopath, I'd be a very wealthy woman, because we get freaked out about those kinds of things. But when we can put it into the light of child development, we see, okay, that's just normal. We just understand that. And then the other piece of it is to understand who your child is. Because I have 2 boys cut from the same cloth who could not be more different from one another in terms of how they were wired, their temperament, their personality, how they showed up in the world. And so I really had to calibrate the way that I navigated life alongside them quite differently, because the one boy would have become completely undone had I navigated things the same way that I had for his brother, who sort of was able to kind of, roll with the punches a little bit more easily than his brother did.
Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Ianla Van Zant, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.